Our second panel today, we're going to call What's Our Competition Up To? And recognizing just how important regional economics are to the decisions we make at the state level, we thought it would be a great opportunity to have our state chambers from 3 of our local states represented today. So while you're making your way back to your seats, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our guests. We have with us today Silas Chamberlin. Give him a wave, Silas, so they know who you are. He is the Chief Strategy Officer and Vice President, Economic and Community Development with York, Pennsylvania Economic Alliance. So Silas is a PhD. He is the Chief Strategy Officer and VP of Economic Development at the York County Economic Alliance. It's a position in which he oversees a broad portfolio of projects and programs promoting the economic vitality of the 911 square mile York County, Pennsylvania region. Okay, 911 square miles, so you're covering a lot of ground, right? Then next up, we have Mary Kane. Let's give everybody a wave, Mary, right there in the middle. Mary is our president and CEO of the Maryland Chamber of Commerce. In October 2021, Mary became the president of the Maryland Chamber, and she leads the 7,000-plus member organization in Annapolis that advocates for Maryland businesses. So, Mary, we are trying to hit 725 members as a chamber, but it feels like you're greatly outpacing us there at the state level. So we hope that most of our chamber members are also state chamber members here in Maryland, and if you're not, Mary's team would be very interested in telling you how you could join. Next up, we have Mike Quaranta. I've had the pleasure of working with Mike for a number of years in Delaware, so doesn't feel that far north, but I know Mike woke up early to drive to be with us today, and he's the president of the Delaware State Chamber. He had joined that organization and assumed the role as president in 2018, and he brings a depth of experience in both government and the private sector. So thank you all for being here, and now that everyone is seated, let's give them a hearty round of applause. We know that you're very business in your regular daily roles, and so recognizing how busy you are, I'm going to jump right into the questions because I want to give the audience some time for Q&A should they decide that they've got something burning they'd like to ask. So we're going to go. We've only got 3 of you. We'll start in chronological order, Silas. If you could please outline the role and function of your organization in terms of advocating for sound business policies with your state legislative leaders.
Sure, thank you. And thanks for having me the whole way down from Pennsylvania. I think I beat you on the drive time.
I think you did.
So our organization is county level, the York County Economic Alliance. We serve 450,000 York County residents. At the heart of our county is a city of about 46,000 residents, and then 38 small towns of various sizes throughout the county, and a very diverse economy. We're 18% manufacturing, so still have a really significant legacy of building things in York County, and we like to build on that. We, as you know, in our role, are often the conduit between the interests and needs of the business community at a very local level. We represent about 1,200 businesses in York County, and filtering up those needs to our legislature and also to our partners at the Pennsylvania Chamber of Commerce. That looks a little different depending on what the issue is and how we advocate for it. But just to give you a sense of some of our recent wins, one of the big ones is our corporate net income tax reform in Pennsylvania that's currently underway. Pennsylvania had historically ranked second worst in the nation in terms of the level of our state income tax or net income tax, and now we're on a trajectory to cut it in half by 2031. So that's exciting for us. It's exciting to businesses that know that that tax is just another obstacle to overcome in running a successful business. We've also worked on things more related to workforce development, and we're part of a coalition that work to advance clean slate legislation. So folks that are seeking employment, not having their past criminal records affect their ability to seek gainful employment, which is a huge barrier to people re-entering the workforce. And obviously there's issues where your past criminal offenses do bear on whether you should be doing certain jobs, but there are a majority of employment opportunities that don't. And so we have a great coalition just in York County alone of more than 100 businesses who have agreed to not judge people based on past felonies and nonviolent crimes, and create pathways to them being employed so we can lower recidivism in York County. The other thing I want to mention is that because we're sort of vertically integrated as a countywide chamber of commerce and economic development corporation and oversee our county authorities, is that when we advocate to our legislature, it's based on goals within our 10-year economic strategy that is part of our comprehensive plan. So we have this 10-year vision of economic development in York County. And we all know that legislative cycles tend to, there could be a couple issues a cycle that get a whole lot of attention. There could be legislation that's introduced a dozen times and never ends up passing. And while we're doing all those sort of reactionary ad hoc campaigns, we're trying to tie our advocacy work back to a much longer strategy so we make sure we're doing the systems change and improvement that we want to see over the long run.
Thank you. And Mary, the role and function of your organization and how you work with those state legislators.
Well, that's the basis of what we do, is we work with our state legislators and government agencies. But we're in the business of business advocacy. We try to push great legislation for our 7,000 members. We develop policy, we testify and give feedback on all kinds of things, issue tracking, and education. Actually, we're really trying desperately, please help us on this, to educate our legislators on financial responsibility, because all of you know that we are going to have a $2.7 billion deficit in Maryland next year, and they're going to come after us to pay for it. So we have been working diligently to say, you cannot tax your way to growth. I actually had the governor actually say that too, but we'll see, fingers crossed. Honestly, it's been, they've delayed doing anything or announcing any big initiatives. We were all told nothing's going to be done until after the election, the November election. We still haven't heard anything. That was a number of weeks ago. So we are bracing ourselves for some big time tax revenue legislation. So our priorities for next year are, of course, business taxes. Transportation funding, because we are severely lacking in funding our transportation trust fund. When you base your trust fund on a gas tax and then you promote electric vehicles and you pay for 2 metro systems out of that, of course you're going to deplete your transportation trust fund. So I'm sure they're going to try to find unique ways to refill that. And you can't put it on the backs of just the people who are driving cars. There's been a big push for a lot of bike lanes all over Maryland, and that comes out of our Transportation Trust Fund also. We're going to be focused on data privacy and artificial intelligence and what our legislators plan to present as far as that's concerned. Of course, climate tax policy. We have in Maryland the most stringent climate goals of any state. I don't know how we're going to fix that all by ourselves right here in Mid-Atlantic region in a small state, but they're bound that we are going to be the leaders on that no matter how much you have to pay for it. Now, that is part of a problem with Maryland, is that we pass legislation without funding streams. So we have a very large education bill, the blueprint for education, and all well-intentioned, but if you don't have a funding stream, you're going to go into a deficit. If you are going to put these onerous policies on businesses as far as climate concerns, and you don't have a funding stream, that's a problem. I'll never forget sitting after Governor Moore came in and he appointed our Secretary of the Environment is a woman who was in California. And she is a lovely lady. And she stood in front of us when we have our annual meeting at the Department of the Environment and said, I don't know how you got this passed. This wouldn't even pass in California. So that's kind of the stuff that we're up against. I actually talked to a few of the legislators about that, and they're like, I'm like, how do you do, there's no money to pay for this. And it was like, Not our problem. We passed it. They're just going to have to figure that out. And, you know, I feel bad sometimes for Governor Moore because he came in, this stuff was already passed. Governor Hogan had vetoed it. They overrode his vetoes on both the climate tax initiative and the blueprint for education and got them going. And now he is saddled with the $2.7 billion deficit. So we also focus on child care issues. Because if you want people back in the workforce, we have a very low participation rate, labor participation rate in the state of Maryland. The problem is we have not recovered from COVID like other states in the United States. The average growth of other states was about 11% after COVID per year. Our growth was 3%. So we're basically stagnant. Governor Moore came in to talk to our board, and he basically said, if we had only just grown 8%, not even the 11% that's the median, he goes, we wouldn't have the deficit that we are encountering now. So, sorry, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer on this lovely Friday morning, but no, that's what we do in Annapolis. And we have wonderful people like Bill Chambers who put together great chambers like the Salisbury Chamber. Thank you, Bill. He sits on our board also, to really fight the good fight here. So.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. And it's an important reminder, right? You have 7,000 plus business members who can't make spending decisions before they implement revenue strategies,
Yeah.
right? And that's not the same way that this is often approached, and that can be challenging, especially when you're representing businesses who are charged with making hard spending decisions every day. Mike,
Sure.
go ahead and share with us your perspective up there in Delaware.
Good morning, everybody. Well, you know, a little bit of understanding of the past to understand the present. Sometime around 1836, 1837, a number of business leaders in Delaware discovered that something bad was happening in Dover, and they decided to collectively get together and create an organization to address those concerns, and thus the state chamber was born. The 50 state chambers differentiate from the local chambers in a couple ways. One's not better than the other. Let me be clear about that before Bill gives me the hook. They're not better, they're just different. Our role and mission is advocacy 100% of the time, to represent the interests of the business community in the state of Delaware, so that it's a place where businesses that are there can grow and thrive, and that it's a landing place for businesses that want to come. I contrast that, and so when we have events, it's all about public policy. Brought in some outside site selectors to talk about how we're viewed from the outside world. That's very different when you contrast that with, say, my friend Carol Everhart, who runs the Rehoboth Dewey Chamber. She puts on Sea Witch, 25,000 people come to the beach. That's just not what we do. That's a great event, but we'll put on things that are deep discussions about workforce training and development, how we're going to address childcare and some of the things that Mary just outlined, and dig deep into those issues. So that's what the state chamber is. And so it takes a very different kind of business to want to be part of a state chamber and be very active. They tend to be established businesses that have been around for a while, and they have, frankly, the time to devote, because they worry. They worry about the future, and so they want to be part of the conversation and have a say in the future direction of the state. That's not to say that people that are members of local chambers don't care, they do, but they have different set of interests. Carol's got, when she does Sea Witch, it's intentional to bring people to fill those hotels, dine at those restaurants, and shop at those boutiques. Again, different from what we do. We're the affiliate, of course, as the name suggests, of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. We're also the Delaware Manufacturing Association, so we are the affiliate of the National Association of Manufacturers. And we are also the Delaware Retail Council, so we are the affiliate of the National Retail Federation. Our mission, again, is to focus heavily on advocacy and high-level networking for our members. So.
Thank you, and I just want to make sure that I heard that date right. You said 1836, so 187, 188 years?
188.
We're celebrating
Yep.
coming up? Very good. So early on, saw the importance of sort of aggregating the voice of the business community, right, and getting on the same page. The next question, I'm going to start with Mary. We're going to kind of rotate the starting point. So the next question for the group is going to be, what policies, practices, and incentives does your state have and offer to lure new businesses to your state and retain existing businesses?
Okay. Sorry about that. What are new,
Yeah, so just what kind of, in Maryland, what does your state do to incentivize new businesses or retain existing businesses?
okay. Well, we're working on the retaining and incentivizing because, well, as you heard, Pennsylvania is bringing down their corporate tax rate. Well, then we'll be one of the highest in the country. So, okay, if you're looking at two states where you want to put your business, you're going to go to Pennsylvania. Just on that one thing alone. And that's usually the very starting point of site selection. We have actually a great educated workforce. We have a great bunch of people who are highly educated. We have a great tech sector, a great biotech sector, and we have amazing educational institutions. We don't have a strong business area, which is actually a big frustration to our educational institutions, our universities, because you want kids that go to school, say in Salisbury, to stay here in Salisbury. I know I've had multiple conversations with the dean of the business school at the University of Maryland, and they're very frustrated by the lack of the lowering of students applying to be at that fantastic business school. We're seeing a big migration. So one of the things is that we have to look back, and we've got everything. We're American miniature, and promoting that and getting people to come here. We are very, very good at startups and innovation. Our problem is keeping them. So.
Yeah, and I think that poses a unique challenge that we don't often hear, right?
Yeah.
As employers, you hear employers talk a lot about workforce readiness and job preparedness, but you're kind of flipping that the other way and saying that we've got highly educated individuals who are ready to work, but we might not have opportunities for them in the state.
Right.
So definitely important to retain those opportunities and keep those startups that get established. Mike, what do you think? What policies, practices, and incentives does Delaware have to lure new businesses and keep them around?
So I think that, there's the group before us, I thought, is probably, the best to answer those questions because they understand all those different EDA programs and grants and things like that. And that's not what we do. There are things that we provide the governor, his cabinet, and the General Assembly some meaningful direction on, and that is site readiness in particular, making sure that when businesses are out looking in the mid-Atlantic region, they don't want to hear that, well, this would be a great place, and by the time we get, the water and the utilities in the ground, it'll be 5 years from now. I'll be dead in 5 years. So it's like, no, we're not, that's just not going to work. They want to know that they can hit the ground running, they can get their permits in 6 months, they can put shovels in the ground, they can open the doors in a year, and move along. So site readiness is really important. I think tax, there used to be a whole host of different tax incentives and stuff, and that's truly just under attack. It's under attack from the left and from the right, where I think it's kind of maybe something that's going to be a thing of the past at some level. Might be able to do that at the local level, where the politics set up differently. But I think when I listen to my peers, and I spent 30 years working in the Congress, please don't show me the door now, but when it's there's a belief, you can decide for yourself, of whether or not those tax incentives for-profit businesses make sense. And so that's under a lot of scrutiny. And so I think, my view is we should be focusing more on site readiness, talent retention. We run a program called Intern Delaware, where different employers will hire summer interns. We collect all of them together in one place, and then they'll meet the governor, they'll meet business leaders around the state, they'll meet other VIPs around the state, while the employer is selling them on the experience of working at Mount Air or any other employer that's in the room. We're trying to sell them on, if you get a job offer from them, you want to stay here, and here's the value equation. So we're doing things like that, retaining talent. In the next question, I'm going to hit the sobering reality that are our demographics, but those are just a couple of things that I would highlight, Zach.
Yeah, thank you. And Silas, Pennsylvania and specific to York County, if you'd like, if you want to share some of those
Sure.
Policies and incentives.
So it's reaffirming to hear some of the comments of my fellow panelists. We don't think of Pennsylvania as an incentive-rich landscape when it comes to business attraction. We do have some tools that I think are typical of many states in the nation around tax benefits for job creation and retention that amount to maybe hundreds of thousands for some of our larger projects, but in the scheme of things isn't what is going to make somebody choose Pennsylvania versus Ohio versus Maryland or Delaware. We do have some more substantial programs. One is called our Redevelopment Assistance Capital Program, which is not loans, it's just grants. It averages in any given year about $500 million to businesses. That can be anything from just a business that's expanding that we want to retain in Pennsylvania, or an institutional project like a health network that we know if they expand, they'll be able to provide better service and we'll be able to retain, a more talented workforce because of it. So that's at the discretion of our legislature and our governor, and organizations like ourselves make the case for which projects in a region would make the most sense. And then on a more tactical level, we have a program called PETA, which is working capital and loans to businesses. So if they do have that $1 million gap or $3 million gap in their financing for a new project and they're seeking a low interest loan, we can provide some of that just helps incentivize it. But because we don't have these really robust packages, our approach is always more focused on just being a great concierge to the business and helping them navigate what can be an intimidating regulatory framework, tedious permitting processes, lots of conversations, at least in Pennsylvania, because you have such fractured levels of government. In our county alone, we have 72 municipalities. Each municipality approves land development plans. So land development planning for your tiny little borough that has a volunteer staff, and then up to the county level, and then to our state agency. So a business coming in and getting somebody that's going to fight for them at each step of that process and explain it to them and walk them through it is a way that we can sort of try to distinguish ourselves a little bit. Up until last year, Pennsylvania did not have an economic development strategy, and we hadn't had one for 20 years. So Governor Shapiro created an economic development strategy, which, as you can imagine, for a large state is pretty high level. But in it at least gives a sense to future industry where are our Commonwealth's priorities, where are their investments going to be. And so we identified 6 priority industry clusters around ag, energy, the life sciences, and several others, including manufacturing. And that doesn't mean that we don't care about all industry. It just means that as we have the opportunity to allocate finite state resources, we're going to be investing in those clusters. And it's no surprise that those are the clusters because they provide true job opportunities for living wage job creation, true wealth creation, and we are authentically good at them already. We're not trying to become something that we aren't already. We're just doubling down on our strengths. And Governor Shapiro would want me to say that he's very proud that this year we were able to secure in the budget $500 million for a new program called PA Sites. You spoke about site readiness being important. Lots of our businesses get frustrated when they work with private realtors and are looking across a landscape and they cannot find developable sites. This $500 million will pay to get more sites ready with infrastructure and then hopefully create more of these opportunities for private business to come in.
Thank you so much, Silas. A perfect follow-up question to this, and all of our panelists addressed this to some extent in their initial response, so I apologize, but I think you knew this one was coming, right? So we just talked about the policies and practices and incentives that your state may have to lure new businesses and retain new businesses. Let's go the other way. What are some things that your state is doing that hinders your ability to attract and or retain new businesses? And we're going to start with you there at the end, Mike.
Next. Go ahead, Mary.
Come on, I want to hear some dirt on Delaware.
Well, it's not a recipe for success to be small and slow. How's that? We had some outside site selectors came when I arrived at this job. We created a conference called Developing Delaware. It's in October. It's in Dover. We invited some outside site selectors who sat side by side with Governor Carney. And he said, "How are we doing?" And they're like, "Not very well. You're slow and small, and that's not a recipe for success. It takes too long to get things done here." So he said, in fairness to John, he turned to them and said, "Okay, what do we have to do?" He goes, "Well, the gold standard is 6 months. From the time somebody submits an application to a department or agency, multiple agencies and departments, local governments too, it should be no more than 6 months before permits are issued and they've got shovels in the ground. That's the gold standard. That's what you need to work for. It's time for everyone in this room and people outside this room to embrace the sobering reality of the fact that your problems are not going to be solved in Annapolis, they're not going to be solved in Harrisburg, and they're not going to be solved in Dover, Delaware. You have to solve them, and the business community has to solve them themselves. We need partners, but when you take a look at multi-decade layers of bureaucratic infrastructure, and I mean that in no pejorative way, it just is what it is. Government just does not, in many cases, move at the speed of business. We're entering a time in this world where disruptions happen more frequently, they're more dramatic, and the pace of that change is just mind-blowing. There are places that we've all grown up with knowing, and they're about ready to exit the national stage, the international stage. Germany, China, Korea, Italy. My God, they'll sell you a house for $1,000. Their demographics are upside down. Russia. You start looking through the lens of demographics and you start understanding why people are doing what they're doing, because it's now or never. China will not be a leader in 10 years. 45 years of a one-child policy has cratered them. So manufacturing is exiting. Chinese manufacturing is starting to take a look like maybe we don't need to be there either. So where are you going to go? The challenge for all of us is, if you want to invest in plant and equipment, you're going to run a circle around 50 miles of where you're going to site that plant. And if you don't have the demographics for it, I'm not going to invest $25 million to put a plant there. So we've got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, no, thank you. And so slow and small, you can control one of those things. The other is outside of your control, right? Much like my golf game, I'm told you can't be bad at golf and slow. Right. So I just speed up. Right. I'm not getting any better, but I'm going faster. So Silas, what do you think are some of the impediments, some of the things that make it hard to attract and retain new business in Pennsylvania and York?
I don't think this will be surprising to anybody in this room. Workforce is a huge issue, and it remains so. It certainly has been ever since the pandemic. So it kind of brings to light and elevates the importance of needing some kind of strategy or support at the state level to recognize what are those barriers to employment that people face, and then try to at least partner with local entities to help address them. We see as some of those major barriers into employment transportation and the inequities within transportation, because a lot of those available sites that we have for development are disconnected from public transit. They're on, greenfield sites in many cases, away from communities. And so we're creating an unnecessary burden for those future employees to get to work. And then we're creating a burden on the employers to, actually get a workforce that's meaningful for them. So we have been trying to do more work at a statewide level and regional levels to overlap those transportation investments which we always need more of, but they need to be more strategic with where we have developable land and where we see future growth so that they're syncing up. We also see attainable housing as a huge challenge. We are creating new housing on about a third of the pace in York County than we were prior to the Great Recession. We estimate we'd have to create 14,000 units of new residential just to meet the current demand. And so that means that more than half of our renters and mortgage owners are severely cost burdened. They're spending 30% or more of their household income on housing. And that's not a solution that we can solve locally because so much of our workforce moves between different counties, moves between northern Maryland and southern Pennsylvania. And so trying to think about how you can incentivize new housing at scale is a really big challenge and does come back to a lot of land use planning, the regulatory framework around housing development. And more of a need for public-private partnerships to help solve that. And then the final one that's been mentioned already is childcare. We have not seen our childcare industry rebound since the pandemic. We lost about 20% of our overall centers, and there was a huge delta already between how many children needed care, how many seats we had available. It's hard to have a statewide strategy around childcare, although in Pennsylvania we do have a childcare tax credit for families and also for employers who are willing to contribute to childcare. But there's some restrictions on that and it's limited funding. What we're doing at a local level in York County is working with private companies who are willing to invest their own funding in creating new centers and building a childcare workforce. So we're investing $3 million this year on paying people to get certified as early childhood educators, paying them when they stay in their job, paying for businesses to start new centers and create more seats for children, and then have that all be part of the child care framework in Pennsylvania around certification and make sure they're high quality care. So if we could scale a program like that up where the private sector and families and the state are all chipping in, then we can start to see that, at scale work happen. And then the final barrier that we've been seeing more commonly is just, goes back to education and educating people around the economic transformation we're going through. We get a lot of local pushback on new development depending on what kind of industry it is. So we're getting pushback from solar farms for a variety of reasons on both ends of the political spectrum. We get pushback on new housing development, and we actually have people saying we have too much housing already when we know that the data just doesn't show that. We have pushback against distribution centers, which of course have their place in meeting the needs of business, but also use up available land that could be for more productive industrial use or preserved as agricultural space. So having more of those strategic, direct conversations about what the data shows, what needs we're trying to address through our economic growth. And those are not conversations we've had in a sophisticated way in York or in Pennsylvania until just very recently.
Well, good, but that's optimism that you're going to continue having those conversations,
Absolutely.
right? We're heading in the right direction. And Mary, what do you think makes it hard in Maryland to bring business in and keep them?
Well, we're not very business friendly to begin with. High cost, corporate tax rate. Actually, the governor put together a Maryland Economic Council, and we spent a year delving into this and met at the chamber office and have delivered 9 recommendations. And the very first one is we need to take down our corporate income tax. I mean, we're just out of the game right at the beginning. Labor cost, we increased minimum wage, and we tried to explain to our legislators that, okay, if you put it up to $15 an hour, then the people that are here have to go up, and then it keeps going up. And why don't you let the market set the rates? Because there aren't very many $15 an hour jobs. They're usually higher anyway. But now you've put an onus on employers. Our regulatory complex is pretty bad. We talked to a long-time developer in Baltimore City. They had started back in the 1930s. They always built in Maryland. And someone said, oh, you should. They bought a plot of land in Tennessee, and they were up and running within, shovel in the ground in 9 months to build a shopping center in Tennessee. And he looked at me, he goes, I'm still waiting. We have a plot of land in Baltimore County, and we've been in the permitting process for 7 years. He goes, we just totally changed our entire strategic plan. Instead of 100% devoted to Maryland, only 50% of our business development is now going to be devoted to Maryland. We're going outside. There's so many more opportunities. Infrastructure, okay? We lost a bridge. March 26th just crumbled. And I will tell you, the Army Corps of Engineers, the governor, everybody was on board that morning. We were right there with them. We got that, the port back open in 11 weeks. That's a great example of what we can do when we put our minds to it. The devastation that would happen if that port had been closed for a very, very long time, which was very possible when you have that much steel come down in the middle of your port, getting it out is very difficult. But we had some great Trade Point Atlantic. There are a lot of ports that don't have this wonderful site, used to be the site of the Bethlehem Steel Plant. Private industry came in and said, we'll take that over. We're going to clean this up. And you know what? We're going to make it a big warehousing area so we can assist the port. Well, they still have land there. That's where they took all the steel. So then it can be all melted down. It was just an amazing to watch how we all came together on that. We don't build roads in Maryland. It's a huge problem. 270, Governor Moore came in, and that was all set in Montgomery County to be a public-private partnership, and Transurban understood that the governor, his staff decided that maybe we don't want to do that, we'll do it ourselves. And then they had already put $100 million into the project, and they were like, nope, we're out. So what's going to happen there? How are we going to build this bridge? Well, President Biden came out and said 100% funding from the federal government. Fingers crossed, we'll see. But the traffic in Baltimore is it's miserable. And what people didn't understand is all the hazmat trucking traffic coming out of the port and going into the port use the bridge because they're not allowed to use the tunnels. Now, however, they have to go around the Beltway or through the city. And it has just become a nightmare. Now, I am praying that we're not going to wake up one day and something has happened on the Beltway or in the middle of the city because we didn't move fast enough to build this bridge. So, workforce, we have 19 military installations in Maryland. We have more military installations than any state in the entire country. We tried to get the taxes taken off of military retirement pay. You would think we were trying to pull the fingers out of the folks in our General Assembly, taking their fingernails off because they were like, well, we can't do that. I'm like, this is the most educated, best workforce. We want them to stay here. But when other states say, we're not going to tax your military retirement, come work here, they're going to go. I mean, that's an easy fix. Let's see, competition from neighboring states, yes. I grew up in Delaware. I have family in Pennsylvania. The competition is fierce.
Come on over to the dark side.
I go over there every holiday, believe me, and that's where we go to the beach and everything. So it's real. I mean, the word is Governor Youngkin has somebody in his office calling Maryland businesses every day, saying, come on over. Yeah, we'll make it worth your while. We have rising real estate costs, that we need to address. And, one of the things, and this is very unfortunate, a public perception, especially in Baltimore, crime. A lot of our money goes into helping in Baltimore. Baltimore should be a thriving, wonderful city. But crime, it's terrible. We don't retain our businesses. We can grow. We have great hubs of innovation. We start out great businesses in many of our universities, but then they leave. We have to retain those folks. They have to stay here and grow our economy. And our broadband access in rural communities is terrible. So if you want to start any businesses in rural communities, that's one of the detriments. Everybody needs broadband access. It's not a maybe anymore, it's a definite. So, just a couple things.
Yeah, no, thank you.
And any suggestions, believe me, I love going, and we hang out together a couple times a year. We bring all the wonderful folks, all our colleagues from state chambers across the country together, and I love getting ideas from them. It really, it's a big deal, and we talk about the different things that our states are doing. That's actually how, and I thank Bill Chambers, when Governor Moore came in, we took information. It's the Competitiveness Red Book, and it's just straight data, information on where we stand as a state in comparison to states around the country. And I will tell you, we go door to door, deliver this to our legislators, and some of their eyes, when they open it up, they're like, are we really this bad? And I'm like, yeah, here, it's all here. And it's bipartisan data. This isn't like we hired an analyst out of the Republican Party or something. We didn't. This is all basic public information that we've combined to show you exactly where we are. You can go on our website and see it. We're updating it now for 2025. But you just have to go around the country and talk to your colleagues around the country to find out that we're not in a good place, and there are ways we can do this, that we can change it.
And
We just
we're
have
gonna
the
jump
courage.
into some of those ways.
Yeah,
Actually, that'll be our next question.
Okay.
And I will say, I didn't mean to cut you off. I want to make sure we get to these last two questions, but it's important to be self-aware, right? And we talk about these challenges, but it's not to, I'm not Chicken Little up here, the sky is not falling, right? We have to talk about these challenges because we need to lean into them if we're going to identify opportunities to be better. And sometimes there is a disconnect, and I'm going to share this with you. I won't say what state this legislator was from, but I was involved in a conversation years ago. We were talking about increasing minimum wage versus letting market factors drive that. And someone in the audience made the comment, well, you can pay whatever you want. At some point, you just have to recognize you might be eating a $20 cheeseburger at McDonald's. And the lawmaker, without skipping a beat, said, I'll just savor each bite more. And that was a sobering response as a member of that audience. And they were addressing a large crowd like this as a member of a panel. So it was a comment made in jest, but it was not taken in jest by any business leader in the room. It was a scary response. So we're going to talk about what your state has in terms of a competitive edge. So I know there's some edge there, okay? We've talked about the challenges we have, but what is your state doing well? And then what are some opportunities where they're doing a pretty good job and they could just stand to fix it or tweak it a bit? And we'll start with you, Mary, and then we'll cycle back through. And we've got about 15 minutes left, so I have this question and one more for you.
Okay.
Okay.
As I said, highly educated workforce. Our proximity to federal resources is one of our great strengths. I mean, we have every embassy in the world right there, if you want to do trade, is within 10 miles, and go in there and talk to them. We are big supporters of innovation and startups. I will tell you, our commitment to sustainability is good as long as it works for everyone. Strategic location, and we have strong cybersecurity and biotech sectors. So we do have great things. We just need to build on those.
And continue to invest in those opportunities. Mike, what's Delaware doing well, better than anybody else in the region?
We've got great geography, so we've got access, as every folks in the Mid-Atlantic typically do. We've got great access to waterways, to highways, rail, et cetera, which is not the case if you're in one of the big boxy states out west. It's a bit more of a challenge. Broadband, which has been mentioned before, will be the first state to be fully built out in broadband. one of the benefits of having few rivers, having very flat ground, and you don't have to go through mountain ranges. You can actually do broadband pretty quick. So we should be done with that pretty quick. Other positives, NIMBLE, the National Institute for the Manufacture of Biopharmaceuticals. We have one of the 17 centers, federally funded centers of manufacturing excellence in the United States. It's at the Star campus at the University of Delaware. And it's providing incubation and really great stuff. Linda's here from Kent County, Bill's here from Sussex County, two outstanding places to do business. I've told Linda, I think, Kent County right now, this is their moment to shine. Land prices in Sussex County are inflated because of there's just so much density, so much, it's so popular as a destination to retire. That Kent County is really positioned well to succeed in the coming decades. Sussex, terrific place to retire, but we've got some housing challenges that we've got to address. Multifamily, affordable, senior. We are top heavy with single-family detached.
Yeah, and as a representative of an employer in Sussex, I can say those are definitely real challenges. Access to affordable housing and childcare, which we've mentioned as well as a panel. Silas, tell us what you think you guys do better than anybody else in the room.
So I mentioned our manufacturing strengths earlier. We're 18% manufacturing with some major manufacturers, including in the defense industry. So we are part of the submarine production and supply chain. We have a very large Army depot that eventually will process almost 100% of U.S. war material in the coming years, so a lot of logistics there. But because we have that legacy of manufacturing and we have that really talented defense supply chain workforce, that's a benefit to other manufacturers looking to locate in our region, because there's not a question of whether you're skilled enough if you're working on some of those products and projects. I mentioned our corporate net income tax, so we're becoming more competitive there, although we'd still love to see more. We have sped up our professional licensing, which is an issue that just drives me wild, that a barber takes like months to get a license when they're not doing open heart surgery, although you do want your hair to look good, but it seems like a burden. But that also applies to our nursing professionals, our pharmacists, physical therapists. So there has been work there in progress, but a lot to be done. In Pennsylvania, and I'm not sure, I can't remember the other states in terms of your liquor laws, but we're always pushing for liquor reform, in part because it just is an intrusion of state government into the free market in a way that's just totally unnecessary, and because we get corporate executives that are looking at sites in Pennsylvania and they can't believe that they won't be able to get their favorite bourbon on the shelf in a Pennsylvania wine and spirits store because we just have such a strong lockdown on our liquor laws. So one tiny thing that our state does is offer economic development liquor licenses, which allows a very small business on economic justifications to go out and get a liquor license that on the free market would cost $300,000 maybe, and instead get it for $50,000. And so we've been really teeing up lots of our small businesses in our downtowns, your local independent restaurants, to go out and be able to do those so that they can launch and stay in business. Broadband is definitely an issue we talk a lot about in York County. We're pretty well connected, and that's a problem because the way our state is prioritizing broadband funding, they'll be spending $1 billion or more on building out infrastructure. It's going to pretty much two incumbent internet service providers, so it's really going to create monopolies for some of these regions, which isn't great for competition. And it'll prioritize counties that are not well connected already, which makes sense, except that we have portions of York County where 75% of our households still don't have internet access, and they're going to be left behind by some of these state funding programs. And then the final one, I think, is permitting. It's an obvious one that we talk a lot about, and our governor has made it a priority to speed up environmental permits, and we have now a timeliness guarantee where if you don't get it in a certain number of days, you get your money back that you submitted. Doesn't help you get the permit, but at least you're not paying for poor service. But that's been just our environmental permitting. We still have issues with highway occupancy permits from our Pennsylvania Department of Transportation. our Public Utilities Commission. And so we need that mentality of fast tracking and making more efficient permitting across our state agencies, not just in the ones that sort of rise to the top.
Thank you. We've got about 9 minutes left, and so I'm gonna pose this last question. I think it's kind of a fun one. We'll call it the pie in the sky question. But also, it's an opportunity for you to kind of wrap up, right? Make any capstone statements that you might have in closing. So, in your opinion, what do you think would be the most radical initiative that your state could take to position itself as a jurisdiction that businesses would want to move to and want to locate? And let's go even further. How radical can we be so that businesses have to come to Delaware, Mike? What would be that crazy initiative?
So I served on my city. I served in local government for a bit as a city councilman and as a mayor. And one of the coolest things in our city was something called the Delaware Skills Center. 5 day a week, 8 hour a day training, healthcare, technology, welding, carpentry, plumbing, taking people who discovered probably sometime in their 20s, 30s, or 40s that they needed to do something different. That's the model. Now, I'm going to get the hook here because I'm at an institution of higher learning where they pump out degrees every 4 years, but that's not the model in the future. It's 5 day a week, 8 hour a day. So if you talk to somebody who's 30 years old and she's a mom and she's got 2 kids, 4 years seems like an eternity. 16 weeks, different matter. There was somebody from Salisbury, coincidentally, who drove up to Newcastle 5 days a week for 7 months to get her LPN. Every single day, drove up there to spend 8 hours a day. 16 weeks we turn out entry-level welders, and in 5 years these people are making over $100,000 with overtime. And they're 23 years old and they have no debt. That's the model. We need to turn, well, all right, thank you. We need to turn all of this on its head. We spent 40 years telling everybody to go to college, and a university degree still has a lot of value. Compliments to the good folks in Minnesota that took me, and Georgetown later, but it's not for everybody. And we are paying for it. We don't have enough skilled tradespeople. We don't have enough people who can care for us with an aging demographic. And the damn shame is the largest generation in the history of the world, not just the United States, the world, is in retirement, and we've known it. We've all known it for 60 plus years. And so here we are. We don't have enough because they're all bleeding out into retirement. So, Zach, the challenge would be to maintain the traditions, but really ramp up the 5 day a week, 8 hour a day, find a way to compensate people with stipends so they can leave a job or two and enter training on a full-time basis. Some of our hospitals, Christiana Care does this, they'll hire people, put them on the payroll, and then send them over to the skill center so they can get their certificates and their degrees. Last data point. 97% of who the business community needs is already in the workforce. Less than 3% of the population in the United States exits a high school, community college, or university every year. Let me say that one more time. 97% or more of who business needs is already in the workforce, less than 3%, and it's dwindling. We stopped having kids in this country 25, 30 years ago, folks. 1/3 of all the private liberal arts colleges are done in the next 10 years. They're done. They either have to merge or close. They've spent through their endowments on operating costs. They're finished. We don't have the demographics to support it. Well, Mike, our population's been growing thanks to the healthcare industry. We're living longer, but birth rates started declining back around 1990. Look at the data. We need immigration, but we need to train people, and we need to train people for the jobs for today and tomorrow, and that needs to really be put on steroids. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Mike. If the business community has 97% of what we need, we got to start meeting those folks where they are. And what you just described, while it feels like a novel approach, it's there, right? We have the proof of concept. So thank you so much. Silas, what do you think?
So
Radical idea.
Yep, trying to think big and maybe controversial, maybe, I hope not, is if I could look at Pennsylvania in 10 years from now and say something we could do better is try to flip the script on the paradigm when we think about business attraction and move from business attraction as the goal to talent attraction and retention. And that doesn't sound like a big deal, but for most economic development agencies up until recent years, we've had the privilege of saying the goal is to build buildings and square footage and create jobs. Nobody asked if those jobs were living wage or what if people stayed in those jobs, if they had economic mobility. And so if we focused more on investing in places that people want to live, and that would involve having attainable housing, having access to childcare, having great parks and trails and open space, having that performing arts theater that SU wants to create in the downtown, having walkable downtowns that are historically preserved, i.e. just all the things that when you travel and you go to a town, you say, wow, I wish I lived here. If you're not a community like that in the 21st century during this war for talent, you are going to continue to fall behind. And we once had the luxury of building factories, building industry wherever we wanted, and then we knew workforce would follow. It's increasingly the other way around. So if you're looking at economic development just through attracting a business and you're not addressing quality of life, you're not going to be successful. And that business, if they choose to come to you, is not going to be successful because their C-suite's not going to want to live in the community. Their employees may come short for a while, and then they're going to move to places that are investing in quality of life. So the kinds of things that look like are very broad and diverse. One that I want to touch on that was mentioned earlier that doesn't sound like an economic development thing is our investment in the outdoor recreation economy. Hopefully some of you are familiar with the Bureau of Economic Analysis release of data last week or 2 weeks ago that showed outdoor recreation is a $1.2 trillion industry in the United States. It's a $19 billion industry in Pennsylvania, and it is in Maryland, Delaware, and Virginia, a $24.4 billion industry that employs 244,000 people. It's also an industry that the infrastructure does not diminish quality of life, it actually improves it. And so when we're looking at industries that are rapidly growing and are going to grow into the future and contribute to quality of life, I would challenge you to think, how does your investment in outdoor recreation, trails, parks, and open space fit into your economic development strategy?
All right, so not controversial by any means. We've got meeting people where they are in the workforce and investing in quality of life. Mary, what do you think? What do we got to shake up in Maryland?
Okay. Well, definitely workforce, and we heard at one of our state meetings that there's only 3 ways we can actually fix that, and it's innovation, immigration, or procreation. That's it.
Makes sense. Get busy.
Yeah. But anyway, so I got this question, and I thought, well, we haven't really answered this question in Maryland, so I'm going to ask AI, ChatGPT. How do we do this? And basically it came out with an entire program on a radical solution in Maryland called the Maryland Business Freedom Zone. Bold tax reform, hyper-streamlined regulations, workforce development resolutions, create free, subsidized things like the Delaware Skills Center, in high-demand jobs like AI, sustainability, and the skilled trades. Opportunity zone, take the tax breaks, state-level capital investment matching for businesses in underdeveloped areas. Make a green business promise. If we're going to pass the Climate Solutions Now Act, get businesses to support it. Have our businesses part of it. Actually ask businesses if this is going to work. Eco First Maryland, infrastructure investment. We have to invest in that. Competitive marketing and branding program. We could use that. The Wire should not be our branding and marketing program. And this could just be a very comprehensive, cohesive, high-profile transformation in Maryland, and we have to do something. So I thought that was a pretty good answer from ChatGPT.
It's scary because some of us may be out of jobs here soon if ChatGPT keeps it up. So,
But no, it's something we really have to take seriously, or we are just going to keep falling behind our neighbors.
well, I appreciate your responses. I appreciate that while we challenged you for a pie in the sky radical idea, what you came to us with is what we expected: real world solutions that could be implemented if the commitment and dedication to growing as a state is there. So thank you all. Let's give our panelists a round of applause. We're not going to have time for questions. This group of panelists had the unfortunate position of being in between you guys and your next break, so I'm going to let you go ahead and take your break. I'd ask you to please be back to your seats by about 10:27. I'm going to introduce our next set of panelists, and you're going to be in for some exciting presentations. We're going to keep talking about competition here in Maryland.